This is Tracy Malone from NarcissistAbuseSupport.com. I am here with a very special guest, Heather Steer from Split FYI. And she and I are going to have a discussion about the expense reimbursements in a parenting plan and things we need to know, things we need to prepare for, make sure that we include in them. Sometimes we can underplan and we stop even thinking about our kids after they're going to be in kindergarten, and we don't even think about what they're going to need as a 16-year-old. But we're going to talk about the expenses and how to protect yourself, how to make sure you get reimbursed, how to put some things into the parenting plan that say, this is how we'll do it, and this is what you need to do, and this is how I'll pay it. So there's so much that you're going to learn here about how to protect that reimbursement factor, because what happens is it's a dance of reimbursement. Especially with a narcissist. Nah, I don't think I have to pay it. It doesn't say when I have to pay it back by. It doesn't say that I have to pay for braces. It doesn't say that, our kid is going to go to travel soccer and I'm going to pay for it, right? So defining these types of things, or at least categories of them, is going to make your life less post-divorce legal and financial abuse. If you have to keep going back to court every time your kid needs something else and fighting the other parent, it's best to kind of think about these things beforehand. So let's go meet Heather and see what she's got to say, because we're going to have a great conversation. Her and I were talking again this morning, and we talked last week about this, and we're like, oh, there's so much we probably could have talked all day. Hi, Heather. I'm so excited that you're here. Thank you for joining me.
I know, me too, Tracy. This is such an exciting topic to be bantering with you about. And you and I have had lots of conversations in this area, so I'm excited to share that with a larger audience than the two of us.
And the two of us, it's like we really could talk all day long and banter back and forth with this. But as we were doing that when we talked last week, we're like, this banter should be heard by people.
Yes, exactly. We need to share this with people.
Absolutely. So today we're talking about managing finances with a narcissist, say co-parent or something like that, right? So it's always contentious. It's always tit for tat. It's always, it doesn't say I have to pay for braces. It didn't say, or here's one like, I just paid the coach $200 as a tip for the year. You owe me $100. Like, things that are unwritten but common nightmare. And so tell me some of the best practices that people can do to start this ball rolling and reduce the conflict.
Yeah, you brought up a great example of just unanticipated expenses. Now, it's really difficult. Like, I work with a lot of people on doing co-parenting plans and putting together, some kind of guardrails around expense reimbursement in particular. And, it's hard, depending on the age that your children are when you're going through a divorce, to sort of anticipate the litany of things. Now, I've had some clients that are like literally 5 pages of if-then statements, like if our child decides to go to prom, and, at the time they're 2 years old. And it's hard to manage, all of those details. You have no idea what your children are going to turn out to be or do, or what sport they're going to do, or activities. And so I don't love doing that detailed of an agreement. If someone wants to, we surely put it in there, but even when you're doing it at that level of detail, it doesn't anticipate everything. So what I do like to see in agreements is you really have to be conscientious about planning. So above average than you do when you're co-parenting under the same house. I think one of the things you and I had talked about is that relationships are already, like, even in a traditional co-parenting under one roof, challenged with how you allocate your budget. Money is the number one cause of divorce, or one of the highest causes. So having these discussions in some fashion with your co-parent is important. So planning, so anticipating kind of what's coming down the road, and getting agreements farther out than maybe you would traditionally have. So to your point, with a narcissist who wants to have more control, but sometimes isn't the planning parent, that can become contentious real quickly. But as long as, where I see a lot of tension diffused is when you're looking down sort of a 3 to 5 or 6 month pathway of things like camps are coming up, school activities, anything like that, that you can sort of start getting agreement to proactively rather than reactively, tends to have a more successful reimbursement rate. So, and there's always going to be emergencies. I mean, there just simply is emergencies. And hopefully you can anticipate those emergencies in your agreements. But I think number one, I would say planning is important, but also some level of flexibility.
Yeah.
I think then when it comes to, so that's just sort of, you need to get approval. You both need to get on the same page and get approval. You can't sign your kid up for, travel baseball and then expect that other parent to get on board with that, so you need, otherwise, I'm sorry, I would say that that's going to be on you, not on that co-parent, from a time and a money standpoint. So those are things to really, plan out. But there's a lot of things you simply can't. And those are things like that you'd want to put in more of the general categories of an agreement. So a best practice around if your child needs tutoring, if your child, has other, mental health resource needs that they need therapy or things like that, like agree to how you're going to handle that going in. Because those are things that you've got to be quicker on your feet about than planning a camp, right? So, I like to see if parents can meet quarterly. Very difficult in a contentious divorce, very difficult in a divorce with a narcissist where you're parallel parenting, not co-parenting. But I think that's helpful. The second thing I would say on top of planning is get it in writing. Every single time, have a witness to your conversation. And I tell, to the extent that someone can with their narcissist partner, always have a witness to your conversation. I don't care if it's a telephone conversation or a text conversation, always have a third party on that. Now, whether that's more official, like through like our family wizard or something that you can really pull out real quick and you have someone flying cover. But I even do it just in my day-to-day interactions with my ex. We each have our partners on the text exchange or the email exchange, or even on a telephone call. If he wants to call me, I'll say, okay, when, so-and-so is available, I will call you back and we can have a conversation. I don't have any unwitnessed conversations. So that saves you those arguments of, you said you were going to pay for that, or you said, this was our updated agreement. Always have a witness. So I think that's also really important. And so that's going into the planning and the approval. Now, when it comes to the actual reimbursement of the expenses, there's a few things that I recommend. One is, I think a lot of my clients have success when they use a third-party app. There's a lot of them out there. Our Family Wizard has it, Talking Parents, something where it's like you made a request. I'll even use, like, I have clients that use Venmo, because you can do like a Venmo request and then it tracks it. And it's like, I made this request on this date and here it is. And, emailed the receipts. And in those other apps, you can attach the supporting data, documentation to it. And so I recommend, using some sort of tool to sort of track, like, I submitted it on this date, you reimbursed me on this date, or you didn't reimburse me, because that's where the problems come in, is in that. The other thing that in your agreement that I would try to agree upon is the timing of those expenses and the timeliness of those expenses being requested for reimbursement. So you can't suddenly show up on their doorstep with like 6 months of receipts and thousands of dollars, right? Of like, hey, I finally got organized. But a lot of people get triggered by, you're hitting them up like every day for like, oh, here's half the guitar lesson, half of tutoring, half of, so it's sort of, at what increment would you both want to agree to review and reimburse expenses? I don't ever want to see it go past a month. I think people just get very disorganized and it goes by the wayside and can accumulate. But, I think having that agreement of the methodology for reimbursement is huge with these expenses.
And again, I think what you're saying is, if they're using a parenting app, which many of the narcissistic co-parenting relationships use one or the other, and just defining this, I think, in the parenting plan as to what the expectations are. So if it's 30 days, what's the consequence if you don't get them in? And what if they don't pay within 30 days? Because you have to get them in by 30 days, and you just met that criteria, boom. But now the other side, how long do they have to give it back?
Yep.
That's, again, if you don't nail it down with a narcissist, they're going to take advantage and say, it doesn't say that. And they're just simply not going to have anything to push them. And now you're several months in, or you've thousands of dollars in, and you can't pay your rent because you're owed the money from the expenses. So to prevent that situation, it is about, when is it due? It's going to be paid through the app. It's going to be paid through Zelle. It's going to be paid through PayPal. It's going to, however it's going to get to you, should be outlined and defined so that there is no questions, no open possibilities of them using the gray areas of, well, it doesn't say I have to pay you in 30 days, or it didn't say how I did it. I mailed a check. Didn't you get it? Well, we weren't mailing checks because that never worked for you and you always lied. So here's how we're doing it. And you map it out. And if we think about what people go through during the, say, divorce process, the beginnings of that co-parenting, trial run, if you would, while you're in the courts and trying to negotiate the finality of these agreements, it's really important to say, in this year of battle, they never pay the expenses on time. Ask for protection. In this battle, they blocked this, they stopped that, they didn't show up when they could. Everything mapped out, especially when it comes to the money, because there's often a difference between what the two parties have. And if you're the one laying it out, and you can't afford to be laying it out, should it be the other parent that lays it out and you reimburse them? These are the things that we have to know are our options and our choices. And if we don't think them through with a narcissist, it will backfire.
And what happens too when the person at first starts to use that as a control mechanism, that they're like, I'm just not going to bother reimbursing you for that $100, $200. Then the person that's requesting it gets exhausted and they stop asking for it. Well, that adds up over the years. I mean, that's tens of thousands of dollars potentially over, a period of time. And I've seen some people do that. They're just like, I just can't even be bothered because I know he's not going to do it or she's not going to do it. Like it's, and because they're like, oh, you're nickel and diming me or you're doing whatever. Well, the reality is all of those expenses add up. I mean, it's very real. And I like the idea of there being a consequence. I've had clients that have put interest charges on the reimbursement, and courts will enforce that. It's the same thing with lack of spousal support or child support. If because you're banking them basically, right? So they're treating you as a bank and paying your expenses. So, or you're paying the expenses they should be sharing. So I would not shy away from putting some penalty clauses in there, just so that there's some, teeth in that threat. Like if you don't pay it within this much, you are having a banking relationship with your partner. You're putting the expenses out forward. So
Exactly.
traditional vendor contract.
And again, having the expenses and having an interest charge on them doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get it any faster. In fact, you might just get the basics and then, okay, fight me. Yeah, I owe you an extra $10 because it was 3 months late. Go ahead, fine. It's to that level that a narcissist will, warp the reality of the situation. Again, an interest thing on $1,000 thing, and it's so much per so long. Great. How do we enforce it? And I know I talked about this today in our earlier meeting that, if we have the what if they don't pay clause, which is in my divorcing book, if they don't pay, then if they don't comply with what was in the agreement, either party doesn't comply with their part of this deal, then they're responsible for paying the legal fees if you've got to take them back. Because narcissists get so much like joy out of financially ruining someone who could barely afford to pay for the lawyer in the first place. So by putting that that's a big consequence. If you're not paying, you're gonna pay my fee to take you to court instead of me having to chase you, pay more money to get my money. And it's an ugly situation. But when you cover yourself with something like that, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, that's an awesome idea. And I do think there should be some step function agreements of, we will try to resolve this through a mediator or an arbitrator, or, and then, last step is to go to court, so that, you have that plan of, look, we've gone sideways on our expenses or this process. Let's go to a mediator first, and then let's go to, binding arbitration, and then we can go to court on it, so that you can sort of minimize that. I'm just going to take you to court, game.
Again, that's what the whole thing is to just try to stop that. And if we don't put some kind of guardrail in there, it's going to be, you're going to be in court, and then you're, like you said with your client, they're just going to give up. It's just not worth it. I have at least 2 clients that are paying for their children's braces by themselves, and they could ill afford to, but the narc husband in both of these cases said, nope, it doesn't say I have to pay, and I'm not going to do it. So in the end, the other parent is like, well, our kids' teeth are out to here and the dentist needs them, right? So having a step up, almost resolution system for something like that, or including braces are included, or medical devices if they need them, or whatever it is, having those things just outlined as a general category. We don't know what the things they're going to need is, as you said in the beginning. But if it's a medical thing like braces, or if it's they broke their leg and they need to have crutches that cost money,
Yeah.
And so it's like, we will split any kind of equipment things for our medical needs for our children, period, right? Or whatever the split rate is, right? Because it doesn't always have to be 50-50. If there's a great difference in salary, sometimes it's, parent 1 takes 80% of all the expenses and parent B has the 20 there. And so it doesn't mean it's 50-50. It means we have a plan.
Yes. And I think too, and it's not like you ever want to go back and have to mediate, but sometimes it's helpful to have mediation at certain junctures in your children's lives, like major milestones. Maybe it's elementary school to junior high to high school, so that you're not, particularly when you have little kids that you're getting divorced, where you can kind of recast what it is that these next few years looks like, right? Like maybe when you're starting to go into high school, you talk about, what are we going to do if they're going to drive? What are we going to do if, for college, what are we going to do for, these other, even college applications fees and all of that. So having those conversations a little bit closer to when you're hitting those milestones can also be helpful. And you just put an agreement in that says, hey, we'll agree to go back to a mediator at this point, maybe one of 3, you can list them in your agreement. And then, have the further discussions, rather than, when I described earlier, the 7+ page, here's my child's life plan. And if you're listening to this and you have children, obviously, best laid plans, or kids never kind of go down the path you think they're going to go down.
Right, exactly. But again, I think there's just the categories that they have to touch on. They have to protect themselves. And again, we don't know if they're going to go to religious high school when they get to be that age, or public high school. But if they happen to go into a school that has, say, a tuition, and maybe this much is covered by parent A and parent B is responsible for this much, or, we'll split it, or we'll have that meeting and go, I can't afford to put them in a $20,000 a year private school for high school or something. That meeting would then incorporate and be able to discuss, but still doesn't give you the answer if the other parent doesn't want to pay half, or it doesn't want to pay their share. So it is hard to define their life. I saw a parenting plan this morning and I was like, what? Like their kids are like maybe 2 and 4. And it was like, they're both in sort of a daycare-ish, preschoolish thing. And their bottom line was, the youngest is going to end up in that special preschool. And then what? I was like, that's not enough. Again, just a closed book. Again, we'll reevaluate. It could have been another thing, but it wasn't in there. So it's sort of, it ends up with more problems than taking the time that day, those weeks, those months that you're working on the parenting plan. Get it done as much as you can now, expect changes, and make sure that it's okay. And it says, we will reevaluate. We will come back to this. We will look at this in a different way when the time comes. And maybe the parents are in a different situation when the kid gets to high school and wants to go to a $20,000 private school or something.
Exactly. And it's, you've got to figure out, there's the dance of planning and then flexibility, in the moment of what's going on, with your child. So it's hard. It's very difficult. And particularly again, with narcissists, where you tend to be parallel parenting more than you're co-parenting.
Mhm.
And, but trying to bring the other partner or parent along when it comes to financial stuff as early as possible is huge. Even if you are the primary parent, it's just, if you have an expectation of reimbursement, then they need to be communicated with.
And I think limits need to be set if, say, one parent is the one who signs up for activities, and we have a budget per quarter or per season if it's games and sports, or we have this. But if it doesn't, like, we don't even look at that and we just go, yeah, whatever. I've had clients where they signed their kids up for or bought them a $4,000 ski pass, and the other parent was like, I don't have the money to cover that. What do you mean? But we said, we'll split it. So what do you mean? But it's $4,000. But again, anything over this limit, and we define that. If it's $200, an expense over $200 that the other parent doesn't know about, you're making a unilateral decision, should not be in the parenting plan.
I love that. That's a great point. Setting up the spending limits is huge. And as low or high of a threshold that's reasonable is absolutely, that's a really great term. I'm going to make sure that that's in all my future parenting plans. I don't think I've done the minimum part of it, but I love that tip. That's a great one. And I mean, another one is, a lot of kids now are doing travel sports. So, and that tends to involve, hotel and sometimes road trips, a lot of times plane flights. And it's one parent that ends up tending to be the one that travels with that sport with their child. And it's, and it has a big impact on that parent from, typically kind of time away from work, or, having to manage other children involved or whatever. It's a lot. And then plus the finances are on that one parent that's doing the traveling. So some best practices in that are to agree on potentially like a per diem rate, depending on what cities like you're traveling to. So if you're going to like Orlando, because you're doing like competitive cheer, then it's, that tends to be a lot more of an expensive trip than if I have a client whose son is a competitive bicyclist and they go to like Fresno or Bakersfield, like it's cheap places in California. So we look at sort of what the general expenses are and agree on either a per diem, and that would cover like the meals and the entertainment. And so that if, let's pretend I'm the traveling parent, like if I'm going to go out with the teen moms and have, a bunch of wine or drinks, or like go and do an activity with them, then, my ex isn't paying for my fun and games, but at least like half of the children, the child's expenses are covered, plus the fact that I'm traveling with the child. So those are kind of specialized sports, but I'm seeing that a lot, and that becomes real contentious real quick, because you're talking then it's a $25,000 a year sport. And so how is all that going to, play out? And it's, again, it's a big impact on the parent that's taking on that burden of traveling with that sport. So
what would you say if one parent is like, I'm not even splitting that? What would you say to that parent? Is your kids want to be in the $25,000 travel, whatever it is, and the other parent is going, no? It usually then defaults to, in my case,
to either that one parent takes the burden on, or the child doesn't unfortunately get to do the sport. So, I mean, that's a part of, it's the same thing with like a private school decision, right? Like, oh, your child might be better suited to be in a private school, but if one parent can't do it, that's sad.
Exactly. But
So,
again, thinking that through, because there are plenty of parents that can afford that. And, if you say one parent, if they want to take it on and take all that responsibility, then financially that's fine. But then it also comes down to fighting over the time. If that one parent, I'll pretend it's the father in this case, if that one parent is the one traveling to the games every weekend, where's your parenting time? How does that get readjusted back?
Oh, I'm sorry. You totally cut out. I don't know if it's my internet or not. So,
Oh,
yeah.
did you hear
Okay.
me?
Now I'm back.
Okay. Let me
Yeah, sorry.
repeat it. I think
Yeah.
I'll try. Let me just do a like this so that my editor knows to find us there. All right. So what I was saying is if one parent wants to agree and said, all right, I'll be the traveling person. I can afford it. I'll do the traveling. But then what happens to the parenting time? If the traveling parent is traveling every weekend, when does the non-traveling parent get their parenting time?
Yes. And that is a interesting dance of trying to, again, in a parenting plan situation, I always advise clients to be as flexible as possible and trade. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. And you're going to need those trades just as much as that person sometimes does. And travel kind of sports and things like that are pretty planned out. Not perfectly, but you're not talking about swaps that you're suddenly going out of state next weekend. So they tend to fall into that, you just, again, going back to communicate. So make sure they are shared the information, as early as possible, and, and plan it out. But I try to be flexible. The other thing is, a lot of times people have multiple kids and then one is the traveling athlete. And what do you do with the other kids? Like, do you pay for the plane tickets or the, all the extra expenses that of bringing the whole, lot of kids with them? Or how do you manage that? And those are, considerations of, will the other parent be willing to take the kids that aren't traveling, and then you take the kid that is traveling? I think that goes down to every situation is unique on what they want to do. But it's all the considerations that go into when you're taking those kinds of sports on. And whenever you have multiple kids in multiple sports, it always gets really crazy. I mean, even in more traditional world, like I watch parents constantly, going different directions when you have, 2, 3, 4 kids.
I can't even imagine. I had one and that was a lot.
Yeah, exactly. I have 2 and I'm already like, and I was a single mom for a long time. I'm like chasing both. It's, one kid kind of didn't get as great of a sporting experience or extracurricular activity as the other.
Yeah, and that happens. Well, this has been such a helpful conversation, Heather. Is there something that we missed?
No, I mean, I just wish, the best with people who are, doing this with a narcissist in a parallel parenting world. I think that's one of the most challenging environments. And I'm just going to reiterate, communicate. Just, I know it's difficult, even if you have to do it through a third party app or through like a witness oriented communication. Just make sure, document, and then get those, what I call service level agreements. To your point, hey, what's the minimum that needs to get approved at what, lead time do you need to try and get expenses approved? What happens if it's not paid? Any of those, kind of triggers are just so critical.
And I think you just made a good point that they should also have a leeway for an emergency. Yeah. Again, I use the example of your kid breaking their leg and needing crutches. That's not something you planned on. Nobody planned on that, right? But it's going to come with an expense. And so it's again, you can't nail it all down. You have to say there could be things like that, and then we'll split it. The doctor said he needs a crutch. Let's get him a crutch, and so be flexible as much as you can, because we never know what they're going to have happen.
And when there's one other thing I just thought of, when there's things that you can look at multiple options, like for example, tutoring is a good one. I was just researching tutors for my daughters, and that price range can go from $40 to $120 an hour. So, and you have to go and interview and find these people, and then it's bringing that solution set, to the other party and saying, hey, it's become clear our daughters need tutoring in X, Y, and Z. I've researched here's the price range. What do you think? And, you know, getting that approval on that as well. So you might say, well, the $40 one didn't make sense, but this one has the right skill set we need at $60 an hour. Are you okay with that? So providing kind of some flexible ranges is also can be helpful.
Mhm. Yeah.
And
we
it's hard. There's always one of us that is doing the majority of the heavy lifting and, you know, the financial planning and all of that. So it's, you know, just give yourself some grace at the frustration that goes with being the one that is always kind of managing that, like on, you know, from the reimbursement requester standpoint. And just know they're potentially going to gaslight you and say, you're nickel and diming me, and just blow it off.
Right.
Just go, I don't care. It really, you know, I actually track all of my expenses with my ex, and it's on my side of the ledger, it's thousands and thousands of dollars. And on his, it's like, I'm not even sure it's $100. So it's you know, and if I would have just let that go, I would have lost over the years that I've been divorced. I mean, probably at this point, 60, 70, $80,000. And that's like a lot that so it's not, it's, you know, it is fair. It is fair to ask for the other parent to participate financially.
Absolutely. And the important part is, especially with the narcissist, is not everything's covered in child support. Narcissists think, oh, pay for that with child support. Or just use the child support for that.
Yeah, I give you plenty of money. I give you plenty. Like, what do you mean you can't do it with all of this? Like, and that's not what child support is meant to be. In California, it's they sort of call it food, clothing, shelter.
Mhm.
And then, but you know, really in California, you can spend it on whatever you want. But the concept is that, and then outside of that, it's, you know,
All we're talking about. Exactly. You said before, and I want to close with this, was you are like, always have a witness to these conversations. And I say, if we can't get a witness, if you're allowed to record in your state, record every conversation if you're allowed. Again, that's your witness now, so you have some evidence. But I also tell people to put it in writing. So if you've had a talking conversation with your ex and they've agreed to pay for travel soccer, then you go into your parenting app, or you go into email and you document it. So on December blank, you and I had this discussion about our kid doing travel soccer. It should run about $25,000 to $30,000 a year. And we've discussed this, and you reiterate it and you cap it, you know, please approve, you know, let me know that you got this and you approve it. So now you've got that confirmation wherever you're doing it. But by putting it in writing, it becomes that validation that they know about it and they can't lie.
Yep. Use the read receipt function on that as well.
Ooh.
So there are some, not all emails are compatible that way, but you can request a read receipt so that you're like, and it got delivered. Even if I try to get a proactive response that says, just reply, yes, received, or whatever, but read receipt.
Yeah, I like that too. Well, last thing, Heather, tell us how we can get in touch with you. Obviously, your website is right above your head there.
Yes, check us out at splitfyi.com. We have a platform with all sorts of educational resources around finances, co-parenting, dating, getting back out in the workforce, and all of that. It's an online portal environment. Plus, we have several support groups for people that just need a little bit more community when they're going through divorce. So we'd love to have you come check us out.
Thank you so much for being with me today.
Yes, it was a pleasure, Tracy, always.
Well, I hope you guys found that helpful. The more information that you can put into your head about what is required of you financially, the more you can anticipate and plan for the future. You don't know, if you have a 4-year-old, you don't know what life's going to be. You've never had one that's 16, and when are you going to get them a phone, and who's going to pay for it? And all of these details are such an intricate part of the planning of the separation and how you are going to co-parent your children. So let's hope that this helped you. I am here if you need me. I have been building a parenting plan course, and it should be out the beginning of 2024, hopefully, if I do it all in time. I've got to record 50 videos, so that'll be fun. But I hope you got something from Heather. I'll put her link down below if you are interested in knowing more about her services. But I hope this conversation got you started. Just how will I get that money, and how do I ensure that I'm not fighting for it for the next 5 years? So this is Tracy Malone. Thank you so much. I am here and able to coach you no matter where you are in the world. There's the map of the world. No matter where you are, I can help you. I am the author of Divorcing Your Narcissist. Can't find the book. You can't make this shit up. And so if you have problems and you're going through a divorce, I'm here to help you. So I'll see you again next time. Thank you so much.